Hello there, I am Zalerla, and this is The Joy of Computer Gaming, where we investigate good, bad, and outright bizarre examples of computer gaming history. Today's highlighted game is Drakkhen, the definitely different duel with dragons, drakks, demons, dark denizens of doom, dogheads, and dancing redness, while dealing dreadful damage with your drags game. It's a role-playing game released by Infogrames and published by Data East under their fitting trademark, Drakkhen. It came out in 1989, originally for the Atari ST and the Amiga, then later in MS-DOS, for the FM Towns in 1990, and the PC-98, Sharp X68000, and Super Nintendo in 1991. It is considered the first RPG released for the Super Nintendo, and if people were expecting future RPGs on the system to be like Drakkhen, they 1. Had very strange taste in games, and 2. Were sadly disappointed because nothing else was quite like it, not even its own sequel, Dragon View. Few games that I have never really played, but saw my parents play, have stuck with me because, well, I'd never played them. But this game is so strange and unique, I've never been able to banish it from my mind. I've seen it called a WTF online, short for Weird Thing from France. Considering my limited knowledge on the subject, which includes another bizarre game I played on the ST from France, Captain Blood. Heck, I use its intro music as my ST outro, I should know that one. Not to mention the weird ST port of Lode Runner, also done in France. I have to say there's certainly some weird ideas coming from France back in the late 80s. I love them for all their WTF strangeness, and this game is no exception. Oh, and for the overly sensitive, you may see some very pixely lady nipples in the character description part of the video. You've been forewarned! This game takes a little bit of patience just to get started in. The initial experience is one where you simply will die, and die, and die. Stand around for a moment at the beginning, some monster will spawn and possibly kill you before you know how to do anything. Reload. Walk over to the castle in front of you and try to walk in and the shark eats your characters alive. Reload. Okay, turn and accidentally drown your characters. Not doing so well so far, so we reload. Turn around, get to an old man. I guess we use the question mark. Oops, glitched too low and he slaughters you. Reload. Okay, finally, go long enough and get to a crossroad and... Wait, where did that dog head come from? Hey, you're dead again. You quickly learn to save a lot. Thankfully, the game reloads fairly quickly. Before I really get started, just to be clear, in the gameplay footage you will see of the game, I played the game with a double-speed processor. What you see right now is the game at the regular Atari ST speed. It's fairly slow, and after trying it with a faster processor, the game was much smoother. After this point, all of the footage I'm going to be showing is as if you played on a 16 MHz Atari Mega STE, which was not available when the game came out. Drakkhen has 3 different play areas you can be using at any given time. In the overworld, when you're not fighting or at a location, the map is represented by a flat 3D rotating surface. There's no shading in the surface, with a single color representing the terrain type you're on, occasional roads, ground decorations, and water. Water is any ground decoration that is blue, no matter if it makes sense or not. The sky is a set of colorful lines based on the time of day or night and look rather astonishing at times, with a moving sun during the day and constellations at night. That will spawn destruction on you should you look at them too long. On top of the terrain will generally be some lightly shaded 2D sprites for various objects such as trees, shrubs, rocks, houses, castles that want to kill you, and gravestones that spawn death that devours you. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself there. When you're in battle, you'll see your characters come out of the bottom of the screen to do battle with whatever creature wants you dead at the time. Oh hey, there's that mule that went crazy on me back in episode 6. What's it doing here? Killing my priestess, apparently. The second type of view is when you're exploring one of the castles. After being slaughtered by the shark multiple times or having the drawbridge turn you to mush or the door slamming shut on your head. Any case, once you manage to survive to get into a castle, you'll see a series of rooms with exits on one of the 4 walls. The rooms are rather detailed looking, especially for the time. The Earth Castle is very clean and stony looking. The 2 Water Castles look similar, but with a green slime all over the various walls. The Air Castle is very icy looking, even the ground here looks slippery. And the 2 Fire Castles look like they've been carved out of sand, though parts of them are also stony looking. The last view type is just a large image conveying the location you're at, such as a tavern, hut, or the blacksmith. I think the blacksmith is the only example of these that has any animation as he turns and talks to you when you buy or sell things. The controls at the bottom have a wooden look to them with a neat-looking greenish-gray and gold-bordered box for the text to appear in the center. There are faceless paper doll images of your characters on the left showing most of the gear they're equipped with, but in the play area they always look the same based on their gender and class, other than the weapon they're carrying. You Because of the flat colors of the terrain, the cartoony look of the monsters and your characters, and the somewhat realistic-looking castle rooms and large images, there's a bit of a lack of cohesion between the various parts of the game. It all comes off as a bit strange-looking that I always found rather intriguing for whatever reason. The manuals for the game that I found only kind of tell you what you need to do in the game, not really explaining the story behind it. However, there's quite a bit of story in the hint book, and that's what I'm basing this on, as well as the random bits of lore in the game. And I just can't take this seriously, especially since it contradicts itself a lot. A paladin ventured forth and slew the last of the Drakkhen. Because of this, he paid with his life, but doomed the people of the world as magic started to fail and all that was builded. Seriously, builded. All that was builded with magic failed as well. Lots of random bad things happened everywhere, which somehow just fits with everything else in this game. A ship that went on a nondescript but somehow epic voyage told of a new island where dragons lived and humans are not welcome. This is known as the Isle of the Drakkhen. Weren't they all killed? They failed to mention it was a perfect square, but this map will give you the impression that it isn't. Here, the land is split between 4 realms, the frozen lands of air to the north, the swampy realm of water, the forested lands of earth, and the desert realm of fire at the south. Each is ruled by an Anhak Drakkhen prince and princess. You know, the Drakkhen that were slain at the beginning of the story, right? How are they alive? Anyways, each with a magical tier of power. Your quest is to collect the 8 tiers, learn the sacred chant, and find a way to present them to the Father. Yeah, I'm reading that right, the Father. Which is possible, I suppose, if you could call 4 different giant dragons the Father. Your characters are sent by a ship to this world, and you're supposed to be armed and caparisoned. Hold on, let me look that word up. Okay, the only one that makes sense is to dress richly here. Okay. I'm going to take up an argument right now. You see, you start with utter crap. Leather armor and a sword for your warrior, a simple robe for your priest and mage, and your scout has a dagger. Not only that, but they're all naked to start off. And your characters came on a boat? Why do you start well inland then? Oh. Okay, so in other words, you are coming by ship well-equipped and then now you're inland near the Prince of Earth's castle with only very basic gear. The real story here is that just about everything wants you dead, you need to get the 8 tiers and figure out what to do with them. I'll explain what actually happens in the My Take section to prevent spoilers here if anybody cares about that sort of thing, though honestly this game's bizarreness is being spoiled already by my talking about it. The game is controlled with a mouse and keyboard. For the most part, you'll use the interface with the mouse and press return while outside to go into and out of movement mode. You can left-click characters to change who you're controlling, or right-click them to view their inventory and stats. When viewing inventory, an unequipped item is green and an equipped one is red, which is a bad choice for any colorblind players out there who may not be able to tell them apart. Moving items around is done by dragging and dropping them to other characters or into the murky well to dispose of them. At the smith, his face also appears here to allow you to sell items to him. Because the game doesn't tell you when you gain items from enemies, you'll want to check whoever killed those enemies on occasion to see if you got anything from them. At the bottom right are 9 action buttons, which can be used by clicking them or using the number pad, though they're never fully utilized. The first says hello, which isn't coded properly. You can get interesting responses from enemies or allies that don't match what they're doing at the time. The middle top icon is to talk and will be used regularly. The upper right icon is to taunt or insult, and I've never used it. On the left is to grab something nearby, whereas on the right is to use something nearby. In the middle is a toggle to determine if your group will attack any NPCs nearby. It thankfully tends to turn off automatically when a friendly NPC shows up, but not always. At the bottom is a magnifier to look or search, which does occasionally give a little bit of information about the objects around you, though mostly in the earliest castles. The middle bottom will highlight with a yellow border when you can use it, and it's to leave the castle or other location you're in. Other doors you can just walk through, so I don't know why they felt like the exits to the dungeon needed a special icon. The last icon pulls up a menu to save, load, and quit the game. On the bottom left of the screen are swords for choosing spells your characters can cast, and thankfully mousing over them highlights which character they correspond to because I was always getting the middle two mixed up. We'll get back to spells later. And in the middle is where most of the text for the game appears, including damage, finding money, leveling up, and talking. It isn't scrollable, which is unfortunate because it cycles so fast, so if talking and combat happen around the same time, you'll not have a chance to read it. Did you see my character level up with that scrolling text? Because I didn't when I was recording this video. When you start talking to the denizens of the world, you find out that almost everybody here hates humans, even if many of them look human as it is. Since humans killed off the Drakkhen on their own continent, according to the story, I can almost understand why they feel this way. One Drakkhen princess is too nice because she's sheltering a human. Humans are being hunted and shot down. A city was destroyed for helping an escaped human prisoner. It's rather pleasant the couple of times you meet somebody who's even marginally friendly with you. Regardless of how the story portrays the game world, or even the map that came with the hint book for the game, the world is a simple 32 by 32 grid, with each tile representing the terrain features in that space. There are 4 regions for air, water, earth, and fire that are 8 spaces tall each, but 32 spaces wide. It takes a bit of time to traverse an entire space since you are walking across it in real time, slowly, with it viewed as a plane. Each space may contain a castle, a building, a set of trees, a road, a line of objects, or even some random patterns on the ground, such as these stars I found that do absolutely nothing but look neat. None of the spaces have polygons that connect between each space, which is especially noticeable for the roads and the river, which have breaks on them at the edges of each map tile. If you're walking along and you come to some blue on the ground, that's water. Your characters will come out of travel mode, and some of them may find themselves slowly sinking into the water and taking constant damage, even while their feet are just getting damp. You can pull out to travel mode to avoid this, at least. So far as I can find, there's no truly accurate maps made of the game. The SNES version had a simplified map that could help you find places, but didn't include all of the details. The drawn maps in the hint book and the SNES manual didn't really match the reality of the world. Some maps I found online were truly abysmal and misshapen, such as this one I found. That line there should be at the middle, so you can see how distorted this is. Because of this, I ended up making my own map, trying to be as accurate as possible. It helps a lot with finding things, though other than the 8 castles, you don't really need to go anywhere in the world in particular. Sure, there's a smith you can buy and sell items with, though what he sells won't be much use about halfway through the game, since enemies drop better equipment before too long. There are 4 healers with the title of a knack over them, 1 for each area. A couple do give you hints to help you win if you want to avoid looking up spoilers. There's a tavern that drops a deluge of random tidbits on you when you visit of varying usefulness, and there are a number of houses that can tell you something useful or treat you badly or even shout for guards, but you can't be harmed by visiting them. Around the world there are spots that may or may not spawn an old man. I say that because even knowing right where they are, it's sometimes hard to get them to show up. When they do, they say a single text box worth of something, which is generally not helpful. You can attack them if you're ready to die, or if you're really powerful. Though one was a pleasant surprise as I walked down rows of destroyed buildings, and he pops up to explain what the city was and why it was destroyed by the nearby Drakkhen prince. There are 8 castles about the world, 2 of them in each of the 4 regions, 1 for each prince and princess. You can only visit these in a specific order as the game has flags to let you enter each, or not. 2 of the castles just have text and tell you what to do next when you go to them. Inside the other 6 locations, there are often things to look at, strange events happening, weird enemies that say strange things to you, and even a unicorn in one just for the heck of it. I never did get a good video of the unicorn in the castle, but here's what it looks like in debug mode. These are all a series of rooms, some rather fancy looking, though many are repetitious and boring to look at after seeing them over and over. Many seem to serve no purpose at all, even requiring finding a hidden switch, having a character stand on a trip light, then finally a door opens in another room to get through. The most annoying room was this yellow and green tiled room, where the green tiles did constant damage if your character stood on them, and trying to get your characters to stand anywhere in particular is always difficult. Oh yeah, you'll quickly find out about the flickering lights, which are in the middle of the realm of Earth. Go here to spawn a giant dragon that will slaughter you. Well, until you're at the end of the game, then the tables turn and you can slaughter them right back, but that's because of how the game mechanics work. The game mechanics are hard to witness directly as the game doesn't tell you a whole lot. What I'm about to say comes from playing the game a heck of a lot and not from any actual data on how the game works. For standard combat, your characters and your enemies all have an armor value, called protection in the game, and a damage output which isn't shown anywhere. Protection seems to be a flat decrease in the damage taken, and your damage is the range of damage you'll deal. If your range of damage is 20 to 40, and your enemy has 40 or higher protection, you will never hurt them at all. If they have a lower protection, you'll do damage equal to the difference. You'll also miss on occasion if you have a low dexterity, though your level also seems to be a factor in that as well, since my endgame characters with average dexterity seem to hit pretty consistently. The protection your characters have is on the inventory screen, as well as the middle bar shown under each character, and it's changed by changing which equipment you're wearing, so it's pretty obvious. However, the damage is not, and it seems to be affected by your strength and your level, but mostly by your weapon. Near the end of the game, you're given a couple of ridged swords they call drags, and putting them on a character gives them a huge boost in damage output. Since every class can use any weapon, just give everybody the best weapons you can, and you should be good to go. Combat spells, I never figured out much. I just used the starting lightning spell for my wizard and killed all sorts of things with ease on the rare occasion the spell actually hit the enemy. It seems enemies have a protection from spells as well, but I'll be darned if I can make sense of the numbers I've seen. Sometimes the spells do almost no damage at all, and sometimes they do crazy amounts of damage. One last frustration is figuring out how to get into the castles, including the very first one. I'll give all of the samples in the My Take section in a bit, but to get into the first castle right in the beginning of the game, you have to learn to time walking over the drawbridge when the shark is on the right side of the moat. Otherwise, you'll die instantly from it. Most of the time, you'll get items added to your inventory and you have no idea it happened. Many enemies, such as these Golden Cape Drakks, will give decent mid-tier gear when you kill one, but you have to stop and look at your inventory after every couple of fights to see what you got, as well as clear out some space for new items since you get nothing if your 8 gear or 8 misc slots are filled based on the new incoming items. You can also find gear in the castles, and this at least tells you what you picked up and if your pack is full. Not only that, but the items you find in the game are a point of confusion because they're not well defined or even named. For example, you can find a dress, which are for a priest to wear, and then you can find a dress, which are for a wizard to wear. They look different, but they're both just named dress. I think they meant robes. Anyways, later in the game you can even find better equipment, which is, as you guessed it, called dress. Armor does this as well. Every torso piece better than leather is just called cuirass. At least with all of these you can figure out how good they are because you can see your protection right there on the inventory screen. Even worse are the rings and scepters. Some of these raise your stats, which you can see affecting your stats on the left, or give you buff, which you can vaguely guess at since the game does list what buffs and debuffs you have on at any given time. Though what does a protection buff do? It doesn't increase your protection or recuperation buff. It doesn't seem to increase my health or mana regen, although it's difficult to tell for certain. Some rings and scepters don't seem to do anything at all. Though you can't tell what the damage values of your weapons are, it doesn't take long to realize that swords are better than bludgeons and rods, large swords are even better, sabers even better, and lastly drags, which just do crazy amounts of damage, are the best. Items with +1, +2, etc. only seem to give tiny increases, so a drags is better than a saber +3. One cool thing about the inventory is that when you drag and drop items, it shows images for every item, even some you would otherwise never see an image for. Scepters and rings are more complex looking than I would have imagined, for example. All of the potions look the same, though. There are a few other misc items you can find. Keys, which are one used to unlock a door in a castle, scrolls which you have to cast the Understanding spell to read, which give you some more plot information, and vials which may or may not have 3 magic symbols in their names. I've never used these, I just sell them, but I'm sure they do something, probably healing and some temporary buffs. You're pretty limited on the choices for creating your characters. You can choose their gender and name and the order they're in, but since you have to pick one of each class, you always end up with a fighter, thief, mage, and a cleric. The women have huge breasts, and for some odd reason, the scout is bare-chested. Yeah, that isn't helping you be a good scout there, dearie. I'd say this was Tits on a Dragon stupid, but they have that in this game, so there's that. Your starting gear lets your characters cover up, though I don't know why they don't just start with everything equipped. It was probably just easier to code that way. Each character has 5 stats to put values into. You get a roll of 5 stats and can re-roll them all twice, but have to keep the last roll if you do so. I found that strength and dexterity are needed on pretty much everybody since melee combat is how almost everybody will fight most of the time. The other stats really don't seem to make much of a difference in the game. Then you get a random luck and a random 1,000 or so coins, which you lose once you start the game, so I don't get the point of listing the coins here. Once you start, you'll notice 3 bars under each character. These are your health, your protection, and your mana. Health and mana start turning white when you're getting lower in them. There are also spells in the game. These are shown with some magic symbols reminiscent of the symbols used in Dungeon Master. I already talked about the default lightning spell your mage gets. The cleric gets a heal spell which heals 4 health at a time whenever you can get it to work. Then later they learn a mass heal spell which I used exclusively once I learned it. They also get Resurrect, which is really handy since it's quite easy to die in the game. The Thief gets an Unlock spell that you'll end up needing a few times in the game. The Fighter gets a Strength spell, which I never really used since it didn't tend to help win fights. Your characters level up in the game by dealing damage to enemies and killing them. This is where needing Strength becomes important because if you only give Strength to, say, your Fighter, then your Fighter will be the only one dealing any damage and leveling up. Leveling up makes you better at dealing damage as well as raising your health and magic points, so this gets more and more exaggerated going in. Thankfully, you can find places you can grind a single character or two to help stabilize this later. This handy spot in Prince Hagken's castle endlessly spawns water elementals, and once your characters are strong enough, you can just let the game sit here, slaughtering enemies and racking up experience. Or if your emulator lets you speed things up, you can make things go a lot faster. Look at them go! When you start battle with an enemy, you can control a single character by left-clicking where they should go, then right-clicking on the enemy to swing. The other characters will become immobile statues at this point, only movable by killing them. However, normally you would choose to go into combat mode and watch a ridiculous act of characters bumbling into each other, occasionally swinging their weapons. This reminds me way too much of starting combat mode in Ultima 7, where all my other characters just run off on their own, and it's largely why I've never gotten very far in that game. Battles tend to be rather one-sided, so they don't tend to last very long. Either you die really quickly, as will happen most of the time, or the enemy dies really quickly. Dying enemies explode in all directions, which just looks very silly. There are a few cases where there's a long, drawn-out battle where you can barely hurt the enemy and they can barely hurt you, but that doesn't happen very often. The combat itself isn't the interesting thing here, because it really isn't. No, what's unique is the wild variety of enemies. The normal enemies are hunchbacks, ogres, various drakks, bunches of rats, snakes, some elementals, and even mummies. Then we get to the weird ones. At night, if you look at certain constellations, sometimes they'll come to life and a giant snake-like flying dragon will attack you. These are difficult to hit because they often try to stay out of melee range. They're made up of a bunch of separate segments and are very reminiscent of the snake enemies from Space Harrier, though a similar effect was used in later games like the necks of some of the bosses in Secret of Mana. For some reason, one of these snake dragons bleeds water that's so deep your characters can start sinking and drowning in it. A number of enemies can come in various sizes, which doesn't seem to affect how tough they are, and these all stand still and shoot at you. The previously mentioned dogheads can be quite enormous. There's a bizarre Vector Man that has this strange song going while he's swinging over and over, and the same song shows up with a giant blackness with a red heart that shoots beams at you. This looks a lot like Icarus by Henry Matisse, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was an homage. The last sizing enemy appears in the desert, and it's just redness that dances and laughs. Okay. You may hear laughter as you walk along. Then a demon jumps out and slaughters you. Or a giant bird will swoop down out of nowhere, grab your third character, and drop them for a lot of damage. Seriously, it only ever grabs the third character. Or you may see a tiny shadow and think, huh, what's that? Before a giant dragon hits the ground and destroys you. Or a big dragon thing with tentacles instead of a tail will try to play with you. For the first 2/3 of the game, you'll just cringe every time something attacks you because it often spells your doom. Oh no, the constellation is coming to life. Time for a serious fight. Wait, why did this guy show up? Okay, wow, my thief killed it after everybody else died. Well, at least we got a nifty dress from it. Well, time to reload and okay, I guess they really wanted me dead. Really powerful enemies have a chance of breaking your gear, which really sucks. Your gear gets completely destroyed at times by this, and the only way to find most of it is through random encounters, so you may never get it back again. Ugh. In the castle there are some tricky enemies. Some doorways are actually a monster waiting to eat your characters. And there's a fireplace that taunts you and has an indestructible enemy within it. There's a trapped dragon in one place, and then there are the unhooked Drakkhen themselves, some of which you have to fight. Some of the NPCs in the castles are actually friendly, but the game wasn't coded to accept friendly NPCs properly, so if you, say, block a doorway they want to get through, they'll hurt you anyways. It doesn't matter too much so long as you don't kill the friendly Drakkhen you meet, or you may not be able to complete the game. The AI in this is just terrible. Many enemies like the dogheads, vector men, and the mages just stand there. No wonder the game makes the static enemies shoot lasers or lightning at you because they'd be helpless to any ranged attack without it. Others just move back and forth in the combat zone as they can and attack anybody within range. Your characters are also governed by the AI of the game since combat is usually automatic. If you're using a ranged weapon like a spell, you'll plant yourself in place and just use it over and over again. If you're using a melee weapon, you'll charge at your enemy. Then the spazzing happens. Because movement causes your characters to jitter and try to get around things in the way, which is the very enemy you're trying to attack or maybe your allies nearby, combat turns into a bunch of things shaking around each other and occasionally swinging their weapons. It looks really ridiculous, but I guess it works-ish? There isn't any music in the game. However, it makes up for it with a huge amount of bizarre sound effects, the most of which I covered already. Outside of combat, there's almost no sound at all, except the occasional bonking into terrain, hopping into portals, which I only did a couple of times, or having your characters sink into water. In the northwest part of the swamp, there are a bunch of ruins. Wandering down the road there, an old man will show up and tell you what happened. If there were some more old men scattered about the world explaining what the heck this weird star pattern is, or whatever the heck is going on here, that would have been great too. An old man mentions you need supreme knowledge to get to the center. Well, actually you just need endgame characters and endgame gear and you can destroy the dragons there without too much trouble. There are weird little hints about the game that don't really seem to help much. I'll touch on a couple of these in a moment because they're supposed to tell you how to complete the game. I'm going to go through a brief walkthrough of playing through the game because it's rather strange and doesn't exactly tell you what to do at many points. I won't say the names of the Drakkhen because it'll just be confusing to listen to when I say Hagken and Hordken and Hazulken. Your first goal is to get into the Prince of Earth's castle. This requires timing walking across the drawbridge when the shark is on the right of it, then finding the prince. If you fight him now, he'll slaughter you, but you can talk to him and he'll send you to see his sister. Why does an old man say the forces from the northern plains came and ruined the Earth Princess's castle? When you get to her castle, it is in ruins and she's taken away by the forces of fire, which are from the south. Whatever. When you go back to her brother, he sends you up north to the castle of the Prince of Water. In that castle, you have to cast Unlock to keep the drawbridge from converting your people into a red paste as they try to enter, but at least a nearby house tells you how to do this. This is a rather tough castle with lots of enemies that will kill you over and over again. Near the beginning has that checkered floor that I told you about that hurts you unless you run straight on through. There's also a fireplace that taunts you and will kill you if you get too close to it. Here you find a spell book which you have to cast Understanding to read, which is actually just a note from the Prince of Water to the Princess of Air about how he's captured the Princess of Earth. Regardless of what it says, the princess is in another castle. If you try to just enter the Princess of Air's castle, you can't. You have to visit the Prince of Air's castle first, and he gives you a ring which lets you into her castle. After making it through her castle, you reach the captured princess and free her, and she tells you she's part of a 9th tier organization that seems to want to help you succeed, and sends you to see the Princess of Water. She also gives you her gem. When you go to the Princess of Water's castle, it's actually friendly, but it's just as large as the other castles. And even though it's supposed to be friendly, there's still things here that'll attack you. This is where the unicorn is, as well as a friendly giant dragon, even if everybody tells you otherwise. And the game even says, the giant dragon blocks your way, except you can just walk right past it. It also breathes fire, but that never hurt me. Anyways, the friendly princess gives you a +2 drags, the best weapon I ever had in the game, and tells you to go kill the Prince of Earth, then return to her. This is the first Drakkhen we need to kill, so I did some grinding back in the Prince of Water's dungeon where the endless water elementals spawn. My people turned into water elemental blenders. When we got to the Prince of Earth, you can easily see Aaliyah doing far more damage with that nice drags we got. We got his gem as well. When we go back to the Princess of Water, she gives us her gem and sends us to see if the Princess of Fire is still alive. Oddly enough, when she's done talking to us, she says die scum if you greet her, but she doesn't attack you or anything. Getting into the Princess of Fire's place is tricky. You have to walk right up to the right edge of the wall here and mosey over to the entrance to get in without being crushed by the door. Once in here, you end up finding the Princess of Fire supposedly dead in her throne. In the very next room, you get jumped, and I tried to solo attack the enemies here, but the dead princess came to life and attacked my other people. I had no choice but to slaughter the poor dead princess. Alright. And then another Drakkhen appears that I find out later is the Prince of Air and acts like he's friendly, but we were in attack mode dealing with the dead princess attacking us and end up killing him as well. We got the princess's gem and all that confusion, so if you're not keeping track, we have 4 of the 8 at this point. The game just rushes you along for the remainder and is just going place to place slaughtering Drakkhen. It feels like a lost opportunity for more intriguing things to occur than just killing enemies, and it all happens so quickly as well compared to the rest of the game. We go back and kill the Princess of Air and get her gem. Then talk to the Prince of Air a few rooms later, who is somehow alive again, and he tells us to go fight the other 2 remaining Drakkhen and gives us his gem. We go back to the Prince of Water, which is the toughest fight in the game and probably would have been even tougher if his spells weren't hitting something in the background. We kill him, take his gem, and then we have the last castle to deal with. Figuring how to get into the last castle really upset me because I couldn't figure it out. There are 2 old men that supposedly give you hints about it, but these do not tell me that you have to be facing north to enter. I had to look it up online to be able to complete the game, feeling stupid for not getting it. Meh. So you have to head north to get in. When you get to the Prince of Fire, he acts powerful and even thanks you for bringing him the other 7 gems, so he'll have them all, except he dies from a single spell for a whopping 13 damage. I reloaded and tried again, and he does a lot of damage to my mage if she tries to melee him, but my thief one-shot him for 26 damage. That's anticlimactic for the final boss of the game. Anyways, we finally got the last gem, or tier, there. After that I find out the shrines I was visiting in every castle need to be visited again, because it apparently didn't count from doing it the first time in each castle. This is just a waste of time, because the enemies in each of the castles aren't even remotely difficult at this point. Then, at the very end, I only had this clue from an Anak priest to go off of. I go to the flickering lights and take off all my gear and just get killed. I had to look it up online again, and go forth bare and without fears means you need to get rid of every single item in your possession first. Then you get this silly ending, which is just a text dump that ends showing you a teaser for Drakkhen II, which never came out. Meh. This is a weird and quite intriguing game, but it's really hard to recommend it to much of anybody, especially modern gamers. This is the Amiga version, which came out around the same time as the Atari ST version. It plays largely the same, but has horrible loading times, some music, and lots of different sound effects. In the intro sequence, the Drakkhen makes sounds that it alternates through while some music is playing. There's also a song of a sort playing on the character creation screen, though the game kept erroring when I tried to make my character disc, so I didn't get to keep my custom party. The pre-built group it is, then! There was also a very German-sounding song playing in the tavern. If there's other music, I didn't encounter it since I didn't get very far. Graphics-wise, it looks exactly the same as the ST version, but right off we notice ambient sounds that you'll hear constantly. I traveled to the other lands, and everyone has different sounds going, with the desert being the strangest since it sounds like people are fighting off-screen and occasionally drowning. In a desert. Sometimes in the desert, it was just windy sounds, which reminded me a lot of the beginning of Daggerfall. Just about every enemy makes different sounds than the ST version. Some that were silent there have sounds here, like the little squeaks from the bunch of rats. Talking to an old man sounds particularly strange, as does the howling from the dogheads, or getting ambushed by the giant bird. However, there's an enemy that takes the prize for creepy and obnoxious at the same time, which is the dancing redness. It now says, "I love you," over and over again, played at random speeds. Healing also has a sound now, though it's just as annoying to use. Dying sometimes was silent, but sometimes had this strange ambient sound going. At one point I walked into the water and then pulled out, and the water sound kept going and going. In fact, once I had just reloaded from dying again and the water sound just started going on its own until the ambient caw sound aborted it. These wonky sounds made the game feel even more strange, and I would have played more except for the horrendous loading times for almost everything. Walk up to a castle? Time to wait 4 seconds. Walked into the castle? Wait 14 seconds. Did you die again? Time for a 21-second wait. Look at how long it takes between every message at the tavern. Come on, this is just text, and maybe the XY coordinates on the screen to show the text. You could have loaded the 2 sectors at once that all of that text would have occupied and had no noticeable difference except the lack of this ridiculous waiting time for a sentence or 2 of text. One time when I entered the first castle, after my 14-second waiting time, the game completely crashed. Another time when wandering the desert, the game completely locked up. I have no idea if these were problems in the original game or failings of the emulator I'm using. But, I think I'll pass on this version, even if I like the addition of all sorts of weird sounds. I really wish this version didn't have those awful loading times, problems making a save disk, and crashes, because I think the weird experience got even weirder with the new sounds and would have recommended this over the ST version. Maybe there's a way to make this run from a hard drive to alleviate the load times at least? Here's the MS-DOS version, released in 1989, not long after the ST and Amiga versions. It plays pretty much the same, but it's obviously faster unless you have a very low-end system, and it had horrible PC speaker sound and music. There was a VGA choice in the menus, so I used that. The character paper dolls are slightly updated, the scout no longer is bare-chested, and the sorceress wearing a new outfit as well. Once you started putting armor on, though, they all looked about the same as the ST version. However, the UI was touched up a bit, and the skies look more colorful than ever as well. The insides of the castles looked improved too, with more colors used on screen. There is an option to play with the joystick, but the mouse is what I'm accustomed to, so I stuck with that. Otherwise, the game is so much like the ST version except with the bad PC speaker sounds. There isn't a whole lot else to say since it didn't feel that different really. Because of this, I prefer the ST version with the higher speed CPU since the loading times are really fast there as well and the sounds add a lot to the game. Whenever I do these version comparisons, the version I have learned to look forward to is the FM Towns version, and this release by Infogrames and Fujitsu in 1990 is no exception. It seems to combine a number of the best elements of the other versions, along with CD music. It also pre-equips all of your character's gear when you start a new game. A welcome addition, since I seem to forget to do that sometimes. Speaking of the music, it sounds very synthesized and is unfortunately largely forgettable, but it isn't awful either. There's different music for night and day in each of the 4 zones, and at least the first castle has a different song as well. These don't always play properly, probably because of timing with getting the CD audio to kick in. For example, once I had the day music start up after a fight during the nighttime. The graphics are like the VGA graphics in the MS-DOS version. However, the 2D objects and the 3D movement don't quite match the terrain, causing a strange shifting effect as you move around. I had to go back to the other versions to check to see if they did this, but no, they at least are close to correct. The FM Towns version is way off. This doesn't really affect gameplay at least. Unlike the MS-DOS version, this has high quality sound, making it a far better experience. The sounds weren't quite the same as the Amiga or ST so far as I could tell, which is a little bit of a shame because those wonky sounds were a lot of the freaking strange experience that makes this game stand out. However, what is in the game certainly isn't bad, just less bizarre. I spent quite a while wandering the icelands and the swamp hoping for some of the strange enemies there, like the Vector Man or the Laughing Demon or the Centaur to show up, but I only tended to find snake dragons. Speaking of sounds, there's a cute little sound when you leave the combat or explicitly go into it. I don't know why, but I think this is really cute. The strange thing about playing this version is that it expects you to use the joystick, but some elements don't work right with the joystick and require the mouse. For example, the character creation is all done with the joystick, the mouse does nothing here. Once you're in the game, it took me a long time to realize you need to use the joystick to leave combat mode and move around. The mouse works almost the same as the other versions at least, so in dungeons you could use it here since it's much easier to control everybody that way. When I went to the smith, it was too fast to flip through the pages to choose what to buy. I really didn't care for that problem, though maybe I had my processor speed too high. This version has multiple save slots, 6 of them even. Not even the MS-DOS version has that. In any case, if you wanted to play a more complete feeling game, but lacking in some of that charming utter freaking bizarreness that I liked in the game, this is a nice version. This is the PC-98 version, released by Epic, not that Epic, and Sony in 1991. It has an entire intro section with a simple MIDI-like song that went through a ton of credits before finally getting to the name of the game, and if it weren't for the Infogrames logo in here, I would have wondered what this was. It finally does show the Drakkhen summoning and zooming letters, but the song keeps playing before you get a choice of languages. The character creation is the same as the ST version, but with music going. The scout has a halter top now too to cover her up. I don't know if it's my emulator or if it was a prevalent problem with the real game, but I could not get the game to allow me to save my characters. It looked like it even supported 10 save slots, which is a welcome addition had it worked. I restarted the game and tried out the pre-built party and tried to save with that and found out it wouldn't let me save here either. It just freezes on this insert user disk message. So I couldn't save the game at all and had to constantly restart the game from the very beginning because that's where it was saved. There seems to be unique music for each zone, for day and night, as well as the tavern and the castles, just like the FM Towns version. However, these are incredibly boring, repetitive songs that I got sick of within a few seconds of hearing each, and you can't turn them off. The monsters made PC speaker-like sounds, which is never a good sign. The game felt a bit too fast. I'm not certain if I had the speed of the PC-98 too high, but since the game didn't compensate for the speed of the system, it was a bit hard to control. Some menus, like the loading menu, don't like working properly. I found that by right-clicking, you could stop the disk icon menu from flickering, for example. Once I had the lion constellation attack me, though the constellation was moving, and the stars for the original constellation were still there. It flew at me, took a good look at my newbie party, then turned around and flew off. Okay. Anyways, since I couldn't really save in this version, I didn't keep playing it for very long. As it was, I didn't care for what I had seen so far compared to the other versions. Up next is the Sharp X68000 version, released by Epic, not that Epic, in 1991. It is very much like the PC-98 version, complete with failing to save, awful MIDI-like music, and bad sound effects. I tried creating characters, but of course the game didn't let me save, giving an error that didn't even let me experiment because it just refused to do anything at this point, and I didn't want to have to go through the entire character creation process multiple times, trying different things in the off chance that it'd actually work. It was so much like the PC-98 version that I didn't play for very long. Being unable to save really ruins this game, especially since you will die, and die, and die, and every time I need to re-equip my characters. What I did check didn't seem that different from the PC-98 version, though. Lastly, this is the Super Nintendo version, released by Kemco in 1991. This is probably the version most people in the US have played, and now that I've tried it a bit, I've come to realize that that's a little sad. This isn't a bad version, it's just lacking a lot of the frickin' bizarreness charm I found in it, and it's merely strange instead. I was able to save the game in this version, so it beat out the PC-98 and Sharp X68000 versions right away. Compared to the Atari ST and Amiga versions, which came out 2 years prior to this, it was a bit of a stripped-down version. The game only works on a controller, and it isn't exactly intuitive, so I had to look up a manual to figure out how to even access the inventory. Ah, it's that head in the icon list. Okay, at least the game does let you easily read the messages that go by and explains a little of the backstory. And you also have a map of the overworld, which would have come in handy in the other versions, though for some strange reason it calls the castles dungeons here. There is music in several places in the game, much like the other Japanese releases. This isn't the same music as any of the others, but it is very generic-sounding Super Nintendo-style music. I've heard some people say that they really liked the music to the game, so my expectations were a bit higher for the music, and it was quite a bit of a letdown. The monsters all make different sounds than the other versions, and they're largely blah or grunt types of noises. None of them were particularly memorable compared to the ST and Amiga releases. The encounters also seemed easier than before. I was able to take on a gold-armored Drakkhen with new characters. My characters also leveled pretty quickly. But a huge positive here is that the game tells you when you level up, what stat gains you get, and what treasures you find. Speaking of treasure, all of your gear and items have different names. Coming from the other versions, this is confusing. However, I think the new names make a lot more sense and are definitely helpful in figuring out what's going on. Well, kind of. I found it difficult to tell how good your armor was, whereas it was very easy in the other versions. Graphically, it looks like a simplified version of the ST and Amiga versions. The view screen is rather slow to render, slower than any other version. Most of the action was slow, and the enemies seemed to have fewer frames in their animations. I fought one doghead, and it was stripped down from the original high frame rate animation to a simple 3 or 4 frame version of itself, which is kind of sad to look at. Also, when you get into a battle, most of the 2D objects on the screen vanish. On the plus side, there's a wandering merchant that lets you buy and sell things whenever you encounter him. This makes holding on to gear early on useful to help make some money. I don't know if he scales with you as you go through the game. Your wizard is so much more useful in this version. Yes, it takes until level 3 to be able to use the generic lightning spell, though here it's called Fireball. Well, in the manual it calls it Fireball in the title, but Spell of Lightning in the text. Anyways, once you can cast it, they blast enemies even if the graphic doesn't show it working properly, and it does a lot of damage. I readied that as soon as I could, and she was making encounters almost trivial, at least in the forest. Going through the first castle was about the same as ever, albeit slower. When you walk through a door with your leader, everybody pops through the door behind you. Yes, that should have always worked that way. And when an NPC says something to you, the game pauses to make it really obvious, allowing you to read as you like before jumping into combat and losing the text. Great changes there. Going to the flickering lights, instead of getting crushed, the dragons that come down give you hints like an old man. I'll get back to this in the extras section. I wanted to go to the other areas to see how certain enemies have changed, if at all. You can't even see the edges of the zone you're in like the other versions of the game, and the game doesn't let you leave the Earth realm too early. An old man automatically appears and says you're too weak and that you'll die, forcing you to go back. Boo! Anyways, this isn't the way I'd recommend playing the game, but I'm probably in a minority in that regard. The slower pacing, being able to play with a controller, and a lot of the bizarreness smoothed out of the game is probably appealing to most people. Some of the enhancements would have been nice in the original versions from my perspective as well, at least. Found out with my first party that I had been selling or discarding stat-modifying items incorrectly. You have to equip them to sell or discard them, as they always remove whatever stat they give permanently from your character. This is truly awful, and I hope the later versions fixed this. There are items of understanding, which are supposed to let you read scrolls or spellbooks, but since the game unequips them when you try to read a spellbook, the enchantment goes off, and you can't read them. This renders them completely useless. Pathfinding for your characters is bad. If your character bumps into something they can't go through, they'll spaz out and shift one direction or another trying to get past it. If two characters try to cross paths, this often turns into them just trying to spaz around each other back and forth. Trying to use spells uses a really lousy pathing algorithm that often hits nothing or the wrong thing. With healing, this is frustrating. With attack spells, this almost always neutralizes them. And with the arch, that's what they call the bow, it just ends up becoming totally useless. Even after playing all the way through the game, I had great trouble getting healing to work. Thankfully, you eventually get a heal all spell that doesn't need a target and works just fine. There was one time a mage spawned on the left edge of the screen and shot his paralyzed spells to the left, so they came at me from the right. I didn't record it and I couldn't duplicate it. You can see a similar problem here when I was fighting Prince Drakkhen. Most RPGs fail to grapple with this, but why do the Drakkhen care if they die? Surely, as the princes and princesses of their realms, they could afford being resurrected by the Anak temples. Maybe they are brought back to life once your quest is over? Maybe they've always been alive, and all this intrigue was just something for them to do while they were all bored ruling on their little square patch of land away from everything else? I never hit max level while I was playing, but apparently there's a bug with mages. If you get your mana too high, you can never regenerate it. This is even mentioned in the clue book. It's really hard to get old men to appear, even when you know right where they are. This also makes it frustrating when you're trying to record the little buggers and one appears then immediately vanishes. It's not like he'll just appear again. I have to reload now. The ground rendering done in the game is somewhat buggy. You usually see the wrong color off in the horizon. Sometimes geometry flips out or doesn't render properly. At least for the most part though, you don't see much going wrong. For some odd reason, your shoes or greaves show up over your dress on your mage and priest characters. This just looks silly. The snake dragons often show up at max size for a split moment before showing up far away. You largely don't even notice this one going on, though. The game comes with 2 cheats built into it. For your first character, if you put in a name of 31415927, you enable bonus points for your character's stats. You can then put in another name after typing that in. The stats will range from 10 to 22 after enabling it. The really interesting one, though, is debug mode. When making your first character, put in a name of Supervisor. You can then put in the 31415927 code as well, then name your first character whatever you want. Just about everything online says that this just enables you to heal your party by pressing F10. Yes, you can heal everybody's stats all the way, allowing amusing things to happen, such as constantly raising your character on the drawbridge to Prince Drakkhen's castle, so it just keeps snapping shut on a bloody stain. But what's really interesting here is the debug menu. I found this on accident, and only found one vague mention of it online. Most sources only seem to care about F10 for healing for whatever reason. Anyways, you get to the debug menu by pressing Ctrl or right-clicking on the text area. From here you can choose to teleport all over the world, and you can show the endgame sequence. There are numbers from 0 to 19, which I couldn't tell what they did. They don't change the time in the game and don't teleport you around inside of a castle, so I don't know what they're for. Maybe to toggle state flags that change how the game is progressing? All the rest of these options are the creatures in the game, all 60 of them. This even includes the 8 princes and princesses, which don't give you their gems when you kill them, by the way, not that that matters. Hey look, a great view of the unicorn right before my party slaughters it. Here we are beating up Hajulka, who you'll only ever see dead in the game. The last creature in the list is a mouth, which seems to be impervious to attack, and is the impossible enemy hiding in the fireplace in Prince Hogken's castle. There are numerous spelling inconsistencies in the game. The various lore, princesses and princes, and locations all have very strange names, so I can completely understand why it'd be a little hard. But this is your own game. Maybe you should have given your team a list of names with the correct spelling so they would all match. The name of the game is Drakkhen, referring to the dragon people in the game. They are also sometimes called the Anak Drakkhen. Anak is also the name of the healing temples, but one place you go manages to misspell both, with 2 N's and an H at the end of Anak, and 2 A's in Drakkhen. That's the name of the game. You should at least spell that properly. In the tavern, they say Anhak a couple of times with an H in the Anak after the N. Or maybe Anhak is used for the Drakkhen and Anak is the temples? Who knows? The character names are misspelled regularly as well, sometimes in a single location, such as the tavern. Hagken sometimes has 2 G's in his name, sometimes 1. Natka sometimes has 2 A's after the N, sometimes 1. Does the river Kurth end with an H, or not? There's so many of these. The dog heads that rise from the graves are mentioned 2 completely different ways in the game. In the tavern, they say it's Cerberus, the spirit of death that protects the graves. But one old man says, even dead, those wicked dogs are dangerous. So, which is it? And why are there graves at the crossroads just waiting to be bumped? The hint book in particular is loaded with mistakes. In each of the realms there is a prince and a princess. They both have the same suffix for the name, and the princes all end with Khen, Ken, and the princesses all end with Kha, Ka. Yet the only image of a prince with the correct name is Prince Hordken. These should be Hagken, Hazulken, and Nachtken. The map that's in the hint book is also confused. Why do 2 of the castles say princess for the name, but not the other 2? Actually, that castle that says Princess Nachtka, that's actually Prince Nachtken's castle, and Hajulka is spelled without the K. And speaking of the princes and princesses, why do half of them have wings and half don't? The artist marked the artwork as done in 1990, so were these Drakkhen images actually made after the game, based off of their endgame sprites? The Super Nintendo version is a special case of further confusion, because it is apparently the result of multiple translations, including Japanese in there, so things got really muddled. In it, the hint I got from the dragon and the flickering lights was originally on an old man just a few squares east of there. In the ST version, the old man that says about the same thing says, even the palace of Hordka is in ruins, which is the correct name. The dragon in the Super Nintendo version says, even Hordken's castle was left a pile of rubble. In the game I was playing, I was just talking to Hordken. He was west of there, not east like they said, and his castle wasn't rubble at all. When I got to Hordka's castle, they said, Prince Hordken's troops attacked. What? Then, you're a messenger of Prince Hordken. Okay, that part's true. What's this about Hordken's troops attacking? Then they changed their story to say, Prince Hagken's troops captured the Princess Hordka. Hagken is the Prince of Water, and is supposed to have 2 G's in his name. What they say in the ST version is quite different, saying Prince of Earth for Hordken, and Dragons of Fire for the attackers, which would have been Prince Hajulken and or Princess Hajulka, not to mention that Hordka and Hordken have T in their names in the originals before the Ks. The game doesn't check your character's gender for text, and always just says his in places. For example, when my sorceress Lily's armor gets broken, it says Lily loses his protection. I haven't been able to find better images of this, but there was a Japanese super hint book up on eBay for Drakkhen. It has loads of information in the game and the most accurate map I've seen of the world map other than my own. I think this is specifically for the Super Nintendo version because it credits Kemco on the cover. This map showed some old men I never found, so I went to see if they existed. With some persistence, I made 2 of them appear. Not like it's hard to have problems getting an old man to appear even when you know right where they are, but finding out I missed them, that just annoys me. I didn't find an old man at most of the spots though, so who knows if they even exist. At the end of Drakkhen, there's a mention of a Drakkhen II coming soon. Aside from that ending screen, this artwork I found by Philippe Caza, and a few screenshots I found on a French gaming site, I can't find anything else about it. Was it completed? Did it use the 3D view, which isn't even shown here? What's its relationship to the original game? No idea. In 1992, a completely unrelated sci-fi adventure shooter game using an updated version of the Drakkhen engine was created for MS-DOS and FM Towns called Edernam. I found a CD version of this that came out a year later and gave it a try just to see what it was like, and, as expected, it is bizarre. The 3D engine had been updated to support hills, though it still has occasional glitches in the rendering. There are locations to visit where you are really limited in movement, and you can talk to NPCs here which show big cartoony versions of them up close talking to you. Outside, you will die if you go into the water, just like Drakkhen, though this happens.
Straight into a trap. Why couldn't he have been smart, as well as cute?
There are occasional tiny people walking around that you can shoot with lasers for some odd reason, and it seems to take 3 shots to kill each of them. I didn't play long, but what little I played made no coherent sense. I might have to add this to our Let's Play Blind series. There was a vague sequel-ish kind of game for Drakkhen released on the Super Nintendo by Kemco in 1994 called Dragon View, the same people that released the Super Nintendo version of Drakkhen. Dragon View is also called Super Drakkhen or Drakkhen II. It starts with a very typical JRPG intro sequence having some evil wizard show up that grabs your girl and then teleports away with her. There are various NPCs you talk to which mostly have a single line to say. In the shop I found, there were items just lying on a counter without telling you what they are. Outside we do have a 3D view that looks like Drakkhen. If you come to water, you're stopped from moving completely instead of sinking into it. You still bounce off trees though, and the arrows on the ground are still there around cities. Enemies are just clouds that once you run into them, you go into a battle that isn't on the 3D view. Random encounters are like a mini Golden Axe map, complete with the enemies dropping things. The dungeons are also like this, though each area is pretty small. In town, there are parallaxing buildings with only foreground buildings you can walk into, which is very reminiscent of how Seven Cities of Gold did a similar effect. This game seems to have nothing to do with Drakkhen at all. Though completely unrelated, Betrayal at Krondor reminded me a lot of Drakkhen when I first saw it. It has that same feel to the 3D movement in that it's ahead of its time and everything's very blocky and strange looking. The later Arena and Daggerfall came along, which seemed to be inspired by Drakkhen's 3D view, especially when wandering around outside. Drakkhen was rather successful and supposedly sold over 350,000 copies, which was quite a big deal back then. I have no idea if this is for all ports of the game, just the originals, just the Super Nintendo version, or something different. Infogrames was started in 1983 in France by Bruno Bonnel and Christophe Sapé, and started writing software for programmers such as Le Cube Informatique, released in 1984 for the MSX, which helped teach basic programming. The name comes from merging the French words together, informatique, or information technology, and programme, which is a computer program. The armadillo logo represented being able to survive changes to their environment. The company started releasing games in 1985, oodles and oodles of them, and in 1989 released both Drakkhen and one of my favorite old strategy games, North and South. Also in 1989 they released Tintin on the Moon, which proved to be rather successful for them. A few years later, in 1992, they also had great success with Alone in the Dark for MS-DOS. However, in 1996, they started changing plans and switched to buying lots of other companies and worked primarily as a publisher, acquiring Ocean, Gremlin, Accolade, GT Interactive, which included Humongous Entertainment and Legend Entertainment, and eventually Hasbro, which included Microprose and Atari. Shortly after that last acquisition, they started using the Atari name, though for some portions of the company the old Infogrames name was retained. Trying to figure out what happened exactly by reading a couple histories on the subject has me scratching my head. I don't know what they messed up along the way, but it looks like they just started selling off intellectual property starting in 2004 or so at an alarming rate. The names of Infogrames, Atari, and the various subsidiaries under the company with the same names are just confusing, so I'm not even going to try to explain what really went down and eventually led them to filing for bankruptcy in 2013. They're still limping along, kind of, trying to cash in on the old Atari and Infogrames software with things like the Alone in the Dark Illumination, released in 2015, which I'm not going to buy just for a few seconds of footage here. Just last year, they announced the Atari VCS, a Linux-based emulator console which hasn't been released yet, almost a year after their trailer you see here. Meh. Just meh.